Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter.
Hi there guys, it's Adam Martyn here, and welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be talking about GB News. Yes, GB News is back in the headlines, ironically once again. Why, you ask? Well, I saw this today, an article from the BBC which says GB News could face Ofcom punishment after a breach. It says Ofcom has said it's considering a statutory sanction against GB News after the channel was found to have broken due impartiality rules. The broadcaster regulator announced in February it was investigating a Q&A session which saw Prime Minister Rishi Sunak take questions from the public. On Monday, Ofcom said it had concluded that the programme, called People's Forum, the Prime Minister, broke its broadcasting rules. Now, full disclosure, before we go any further with this, I have not watched GB News. The idea of it to me was not an appealing one. I have no interest in watching it. You know, I'll get my news from elsewhere, thank you very much. But I do recognise that there are people out there who do watch it, who do find some basis for it. So, you know, I appreciate that we all watch different things. But I just wanted to put my position out there. I don't watch GB News actively, but I do find it interesting to sort of monitor it, see how it progresses through the TV landscape, because it's only been around for a couple of years, and it seems to be getting into trouble with Ofcom at least pretty frequently. Given this represents a serious and repeated breach of these rules, we are now starting the process for consideration of a statutory sanction against GB News. That was what Ofcom said. So it seems like they've basically finally had enough of their constant rule breaking, and now they finally want to take some reported action. As to, you know, statutory sanction, that could be financial, that could be to do with their license. We'll see if it explains it as we go on. In a statement posted on its website, GB News said, "The upcoming general election will be decided by the people of Britain, not journalists, not Ofcom regulators, but ordinary people. That is why GB News decided to host a People's Forum with Rishi Sunak earlier this year to allow citizens a chance to directly challenge and interrogate their Prime Minister." Now, on the surface of it, I mean, yes, the election is going to be decided by people, by you and me if you're in the UK, not by journalists, not by regulators. I get that sentiment. But hosting something with the Prime Minister, where, as far as I'd heard about this programme when it aired at the time, there was no... It was just Rishi Sunak, you know, there weren't any other politicians there representing other parties, so some would argue, and again, full disclosure, I haven't watched this programme on GB News, but some people, I guess, can make the argument that it creates an unbalanced forum, that yes, while people, as they say, can challenge and interrogate them with only one person, it doesn't necessarily create a level playing field in terms of a debate, but I guess that depends on the kind of questions the audience asked. The broadcast regulator said the episode received a total of 547 complaints and was presented in the context of the forthcoming general election. Ofcom had no issue with this programme's editorial format in principle, it said in its ruling. "We recognise that this programme would focus mainly on the Conservative Party's policies and track record on a number of specific issues, meaning that Conservative viewpoints would be prevalent. We are clear that this, in of itself, did not mean that the programme could not comply with due impartiality rules under the code." Right, yes, so it's due impartiality rules that they're claiming they've breached. It was incumbent on GB News, however, given the major matters under discussion, to ensure that an appropriately wide range of significant views was given due weight in the programme or in other clearly linked and timely programmes. So that sort of ties into what I was saying there about when you have these sort of, I guess, debates or, you know, talking points. Again, depending on what the people ask the Prime Minister, it's always better, I think, on these debate programmes to have representatives from all political parties, or at least all the major ones that will be taking part in the general election coming up. The regulator noted that the Labour Party's positions and views were not included, and nor was there a reference to any future programme where they would be. Ofcom concluded, "We found that an appropriately wide range of significant viewpoints was not presented and given due weight in this case. As a result, Rishi Sunak had a mostly uncontested platform to promote the policies and performance of his government in a period preceding a UK general election." The Prime Minister has said that there will be a general election in the second half of 2024. The sooner the better, if you ask me. But in terms of that, though, what it's saying, you know, it's not just about what I guess he's being grilled on. It's about how he, through the grilling, can promote his party's policies, how he can promote the performance of the current government we have. Whereas, you know, if you have other politicians, not just from Labour, but say Liberal Democrats, Green Party, etc., you can have people who can challenge that. So The due impartiality rule, I can kind of see where Ofcom's coming from. Again, I haven't watched this program in full. However, I did notice that on YouTube, GB News posted on their YouTube channel, actually, basically asking people to make their own mind, and they're sort of going through the points that Ofcom had raised and giving examples as to why that's counterpointed here. And it does seem like on the surface of it, again, from some of the questions that they're highlighting here, that Rishi Sunak was indeed challenged and stuff like that. But again, I think we'd need to see the full program, and it's actually sort of inspiring me to hopefully seek out the program. Hopefully it's available somewhere. But if you watch this program at the time, let me know like the full scope of it, because it's very easy, not just for GB News, but very easy for anybody to sort of cherry pick moments to serve their narrative. According to its website, Ofcom sanctions could see the broadcast regulator impose a financial penalty, shorten a license, revoke a license, issue a direction not to repeat a program, issue a direction to broadcast a correction or a statement of Ofcom's finding. Now, out of these 5 options, I think there's only 1 or 2, actually maybe only just 1, that seems more likely. Just to break them down, shortening or revoking a license, I really don't think that's going to happen. Considering Ofcom is saying that this is a repeated breach from GB News, I think it might say it later down the line. It's like 12 or 13 times this has happened now since its launch in a 3-year span. That's not good when it comes to Ofcom, but they haven't shortened or revoked licenses yet, so it really doesn't make me think they're going to do that now. It's sort of, all that big talk and bluster, like, oh, we're going to do this, but then if you don't actually do it, it sort of weakens your argument. The other thing, well, actually, 2 things might happen. The thing I think is likely is a financial penalty. Again, they're saying statutory sanctions are being considered. Financial sanctions could come as a part of that. And I think, again, with repeated breaches, they'll slap a fine on them. As to what that fine will be, who knows? GB News does have some money behind it with some of its investors and stuff like that. So it might not blunt them much, but it seems one of the most likely outcomes from all this. The other one, I think, is issue a direction not to repeat a program. But they might not enforce that because of the nature of it. This was a sort of debate-based program. Yes, you could repeat it because a lot of the issues that I suppose were raised in that debate with the public are still relevant now, particularly going into a general election. However, given that Ofcom feels that due impartiality has not been followed, they might issue GB News saying, look, do not repeat this program, or, if you're going to make something similar, make it comply more with due impartiality, whether that's getting other politicians on, whether that's making sure the questions are abroad and some, critiquing and stuff like that. Basically, the point's raised, but I think the program won't be repeated, and if it is, that might be cause for Ofcom to slap more penalties on GB News. Issue a direction to broadcast a correction or a statement of Ofcom's finding. GB News strikes me as the kind of company that would just not do that anyway, even if it meant more penalties for them. They almost seem, all these broadcasters are subject to Ofcom before even going on the air. So, you'd think with the organisation that's basically allowing you to stay on the air, they would follow the directions. But I don't know, I just feel if they were told to make a statement, they'd basically throw 2 fingers up at them. The broadcast regulator has found GB News in breach of its rules 12 times since it launched in 2021. There are 7 investigations that are still outstanding. How long do these things take, man? Including one into a programme hosted by its former presenter, Dan Wootton, in relation to fairness and privacy rules. An episode of Nigel Farage's show is being investigated for due impartiality, and other programmes, including Breakfast with Eamon, as in Eamon Holmes, and Isabel Webster, are being investigated under rules about due impartiality and broadcaster views and opinions. In March, Ofcom told the channel it was on notice over future breaches. Oh God. The regulator warned repeated contraventions of the relevant part of its code would lead to a sanction. So again, but all this talk on notice, statutory sanctions and stuff like that, that's all well and good saying that, but if you're going to mean it, you actually have to implement it. GB News, going off Ofcom's code alone, regardless of what you think of the channel, it has breached these rules several times. And if Ofcom continues to either, drag out these investigations or not issue the supposed threats that they're issuing, then what incentive is there for GB News to change up its act? I mean, I think it's well known that with some of its presenters, particularly people say like Nigel Farage, are we going to get due impartiality from him? No, of course we aren't. And GB News sort of set itself up to be that, different from, say, the BBC and the other major broadcasters, in that, whether implied or otherwise, that opinion pieces were going to be more dominant, or you get, as they say, the real talk. But it really is opinion-led. I mean, I'm of the view, as are some, not everybody, I acknowledge that, but I think by keeping your news as sort of impartial as you can, as in reporting the news, the facts, that's how I personally have always preferred my news. If I want an opinion piece, I'll go and seek it out. I don't want a newscaster across any channel, by the way, any channel, any broadcaster. I don't want a newscaster to give me their take on what's going on in the world. I don't mean any disrespect in that, but I watch the news to gain the information, to gain the facts in a plain, simple, and in an ideal world, impartial manner. Again, if I want a think piece, I'll go and seek out a specific podcast. I'll go and watch an interview on YouTube or something like that. So yeah, I mean, obviously some people do want to have opinion pieces on news, and that's your view, that's perfectly valid, but yeah, due impartiality, it doesn't really seem that present at GB News, and I don't think their presenters actively want it. This leads into a thing as well, particularly with, say, certain politicians hosting programs on GB News. I believe Jacob Rees-Mogg hosts a program, and I have a major issue with politicians of any party, no matter where they align with, hosting news-based programs whilst they are still a member of parliament. If you're a member of parliament, in my view, you should be serving your community, serving your constituents. If you want to make a news program, do that, stop being an MP, leave the job, or, retire as an MP and do that. Because I think it's a major sort of breach in what an MP should be allowed to do. We could get in this whole rabbit hole of politics, which I don't really want to do. But yeah, GB News has a lot of problems. As I say, it's not a channel I personally sought out. When I heard what it was going to be, what they were aiming for, that didn't appeal to me personally as a viewer. Again, I respect that it does appeal to some viewers out there, which is perfectly valid, just not to me. But it seems like they constantly breach Ofcom's rules on a regular basis. So I can see I can see their outline on this. I can see where they're coming from. Will it actually lead to any change regarding GB News? At this present moment, I really don't think so. I think Ofcom has done a lot of blustering. It's done a lot of, puffing up the chest and saying this is what we're going to do. And then seemingly, at least to me, they haven't really taken any decisive action. GB News hasn't really been affected that greatly, apart from a few presenters being or left or been booted off or whatever. So I don't really think much is going to happen, but I think GB News, is it in trouble in the sense that it's going to disappear from TV screens? I don't think in the immediate future, but if it carries on, if it keeps, basically wrestling with the media regulator, which again, may I remind you, is you got to be on their good books to basically maintain broadcasting on the airwaves. So if they continue down this path and if it gets more severe, particularly as we enter the general election season, then maybe, just maybe, there could be some dangers for GB News existing on the TV. Would I be sad about that? Not really. But that is all for this video. Thank you very much for watching. A bit more of an intense one, I guess. Some politics involved in there. But again, I'm trying to look at this just as what's been reported. I'm trying to view it from Ofcom's side. I'm trying to view it from GB News' side in terms of their rebuke. Let me know what you think about this down in the comments down below. Also, subscribe to the channel if you're new. We'd love to have you aboard. In the meantime, I've been Adam Martyn from AMTV. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Thank you to our patrons for helping to support the show, and a special thank you to Macra, Ethan Carberry-Holt, Bruce Danton, Globe of Reviews, Derek Chambers, Shaun Knock, Daud Khan, Liam De-Maine, Trev Hughes, Ajmac 200017, Dec KP 20, Simon Harrisson, Evan Hart 41, Jen, Ted Elliott, Tim Ripley, Mr. Eurovision 1986, are AMTV staff members.